You know, if I didn't know any better, I'd say that Mr. Sullivan is very, very, very protective of his suitcases and luggage. Seriously, I dare you to make a drinking game of the amount of times this guy says the term accoutrement. Disclaimer: the narrator of Cinematographic Studios does not approve of drinking games. Period. First impressions can do a lot to set the tone for your movie. Trying to make sense out of the plot of Bad Times at the El Royale is a little bit like trying to make sense out of Murder on the Orient Express. Both movies ironically have the same problem, except Murder on the Orient Express had the advantage of being streamlined around a murder mystery where everyone was a suspect and where the location was a derailed train stranded in the middle of the icy mountains. And that movie has its own host of problems, not the least of which being that the motive for the murder in question is pre-established and then re-established by the detective, and theoretically, the main supporting cast has to play catch-up. I still have mixed feelings about Murder on the Orient Express, particularly concerning the ending, so I'm not sure if I'm ready to review that one yet. El Royale is a movie about 7 strangers, each of whom theoretically have a chip on their shoulder and need to make amends. But one of the strangers doesn't even show up until the halfway point of the movie, and by the time they do, the movie turns into a hostage situation. In 1969, the El Royale is an abandoned bi-state motel in Lake Tahoe on the border between California and Nevada that presumably lost its gambling license and where the only rooms available are on the main lodge, in close proximity to the lobby. Guests at the El Royale have the option to stay at either the California rooms, ostensibly where the warmth and sunshine is, and which cost $1 more, or the Nevada rooms, which promise hope and opportunity, but they're not allowed to sell alcohol in Nevada, meaning that if guests want to have a drink, they have to do so on the California side. Did I mention that coffee is 25 cents a cup? Laramie Sullivan is supposedly an upbeat vacuum salesman for Calhoun Appliances who makes a really big deal about his suitcases in relation to divvying up the rooms, in particular Room 1 on the California side. We very quickly find out that Sullivan is actually Dwight Broadbeck, an FBI agent sent directly by J. Edgar Hoover to retrieve their misplaced surveillance equipment, which includes wires and microphones, and discovers a camera. This movie takes place during or at the tail end of Vietnam. He finds a secret door leading to an observation corridor to spy on guests through a two-way mirror. When he discovers that Dakota Johnson's character, Emily Summerspring, has a hostage in room 7, he's told not to interfere, but does so anyway at the cost of his life, apparently not bothering to handcuff Emily after subduing her. Meanwhile, Jeff Bridges plays a priest named Daniel Flynn, not to be confused with Kevin Flynn. Turns out he's actually a bank robber named Doc O'Kelly, who's done time for an armored truck robbery, and is apparently suffering from dementia and, while staying at room 4, is looking for a bag of money he and his partner stole from the truck that his brother Felix buried in the floor of one of the rooms 10 years prior. Darlene Sweet is a church choir singer turned struggling backup lounge singer who wants to be a lead but supposedly gets in trouble for singing off key and not being a team player, although I'm not really sure why. Her voice sounds fine to me. Darlene is at the El Royale because she has a 6 o'clock job singing in Reno tomorrow and seems suspicious of Daniel Flynn after they've been to the lobby. Her suspicions are confirmed when Flynn tries to drug her and she hits him over the head with a bottle of champagne, knocking him the f*** out. He's found by the concierge, Miles Miller, who apparently has a history of killing 123 people, has a drug problem, and is apparently told by management to watch guests. Earlier he told Flynn this is no place for a priest. Upon trying to escape, Darlene catches Sullivan/Broadbeck in the act of sabotaging the cars and witnesses his murder. When Daniel catches up with Darlene and reveals who he is, he comes to the conclusion that the money is buried in Nevada Room 5, where Darlene is staying. Flynn offers to split it with her in exchange for her help retrieving it. They come into possession of an incriminating microfilm, but before they can make sense out of it, they end up being taken hostage by Billy Lee's street gang, along with Miles, who is taken hostage by Sullivan's killer, Emily, after being caught in the blast of her shotgun. If I have to spend the entire review talking about Dakota Johnson, we'll be here all day. Emily is supposedly a gangster, but she's just batshit crazy and a reprehensible bitch, but nowhere near as bonkers as Billy Lee. Emily and Rose were members of Billy's death cult, but only one of them fell in love with him. She kidnaps her sister Rose and tells Rose that she's safe with her even though the bitch has her tied up, just shot an FBI agent and a concierge with a double-barrel shotgun, and Rose spent the last several hours in the trunk of her damn car. She's on the run from Billy Lee, who Rose calls because Billy Lee has somehow managed to put the sisters against each other. And here's where I start to run into problems. Every time I sit through this movie, something takes me out of it. My thoughts always circle back to the Billy Lee storyline. So, I have a question. How did Billy Lee and his crew get to the El Royale so fast when Rose seemed to have no idea where the hell she and her sister even were? In the article that I found, Drew Goddard says that the movie is about these 7 people dealing with a mysterious world. But as far as I can tell, about the only thing that's mysterious about this movie's world is the fact that we have no idea who's on the microfilm and the fact that Felix, Flynn's brother, gets shot at point blank range by an unknown assailant that we know nothing about and who we never see again. In theory, the El Royale is a redemption story, but the only character who really gets to walk away from their mistakes is Darlene, and I'm still not entirely sure what mistakes she's made, so it comes off like she just has bad luck. Flynn is just trying to get his stolen money back, Sullivan is basically an undercover officer on assignment and doesn't really have anything in the way of atonement, Miles is a rookie soldier who never got any counseling for any of the people he killed during war, and Billy Lee, Emily, and Rose are just brainwashed murderers. So if there's a story here, it's a story about a lounge singer and a man pretending to be a priest who start out being mistrustful of each other and end up in an uneasy alliance in a sea of bad people, all the while bonding with each other, if you want to call it that. Aesthetically, for a movie set in the 1960s, the hotel looks beautiful, and I like the contrast between the decor of California versus Nevada. The interplay between Jeff Bridges and Cynthia Erivo can be genuinely charming. As for how Chris Hemsworth and Dakota Johnson are integrated into the story, they're a convenience for the story, but I don't really care for any scene that they're in. Because Billy Lee and Rose are psychopathic idiots, and Emily is a psychopathic idiot. For Pete's sake, the woman shot a cop at point blank range and doesn't seem to mind. At the end of the movie, even though he's not a real priest, Darlene asks Flynn to pray for Miles, who's been mortally wounded after that Rose stabs him fatally, because Rose is an asshole. I should also mention that this movie has a very weird correlation with faith and what writer Drew Goddard refers to as very aggressive spiritual themes. Earlier, we were shown a flashback to Billy Lee giving his death gang a lecture about faith. I'm not going to spend any time interrogating Billy Lee's mindset because the man is clearly cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and I don't mean that in a good way. But from what I can gather, he and his gang seem to revel in the idea of killing anyone who doesn't understand their way. And they all seem to have the mindset of, we're all animals, it's in our nature. While the implications this mindset has on the nature versus nurture argument are monumentally f***ed up, there's very little to separate Emily and Rose from Billy Lee and the death cult, especially when Emily doesn't seem to care that she killed a cop. I mean, all 3 of them are f***ed in the head, but I'd make an argument that Billy has it worse. But anyway, Miles dies, and after everyone else has been killed, Darlene and Flynn leave the El Royale with the money that Flynn stole, but not before Darlene throws the microfilm into the fire. Oh, did I forget to mention that? The hotel catches fire during the confrontation between Darlene, Flynn, and the Billy Lee Judgment Day gang, after Billy Lee plays a game of Russian roulette and shoots Emily. I'm probably the only person who's tried to make sense out of this movie, or maybe I'm not. But I don't know if I've ever seen a movie where I feel like I have to be the person who wrote and directed it to understand what it's getting at, if anything. Despite trying multiple times to watch this movie, I'm still a little unclear about what it's trying to say. This is the most confusing experience I've ever had with a movie since freaking Looper, and I hated Looper in more ways than I could possibly explain to you. I'm going to give Bad Times at the El Royale a 5.5 out of 10. The aesthetic details of the hotel is off the charts in this movie, and it manages to make the 1960s, or maybe early 70s, look less depressing. But Jeff Bridges and Cynthia Erivo are the only protagonists in a story of mean-spirited blank slates. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm about to go get myself a cup of coffee, though I don't know if I'll be able to vouch for the quality.